What happens when a Filipino janitor is falsely accused of stealing from a wealthy tourist? Can he prove his innocence when no one believes him? Watch as he stands tall against injustice with everything on the line. Will the truth set him free, or will lies prevail? Find out in this powerful story. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. The sun was setting over the sprawling city of Seattle, casting a warm, golden hue across the streets. The bustling city had begun to slow down as the evening approached, and the sky above the towering buildings turned into a palette of oranges and purples. Outside the Meridian Hotel, the luxurious glass structure shimmered under the fading daylight. Surrounded by modern skyscrapers, sleek cars parked along the curb, and the sound of distant traffic, the hotel stood as a symbol of wealth and grandeur in the heart of the city. Inside, the hotel exuded an air of sophistication. The polished marble floors gleamed in the soft glow of chandelier light, their crystals catching every ray of light. The walls were adorned with exquisite works of art, each piece more elegant than the last, and the faint sound of classical music played in the background, as if to further elevate the refined atmosphere. Guests in elegant suits and evening dresses moved through the lobby, their voices a low murmur of whispered conversations and quiet laughter, their presence reinforcing the image of exclusivity the hotel projected. Amidst this world of luxury, Lorenzo Santos, a Filipino janitor, moved through the hotel's lobby, sweeping the floors with quiet determination. The 30-year-old man had dark, sun-bronzed skin, and his features were weathered from long hours of hard work. His once pristine blue janitor's uniform was now faded and frayed at the edges, and his tired eyes reflected the exhaustion of a long shift. Despite the exhaustion, Lorenzo's focus never wavered. His work was his priority, even if no one noticed him, and even if he was invisible to the guests around him. Lorenzo's life in Seattle was far from glamorous. He had arrived here several years ago, seeking a better life for himself and his family back in the Philippines. His job at the Meridian Hotel was simple, yet it paid the bills. He scrubbed the floors, wiped down surfaces, and kept the hotel clean, tasks that, to the guests, were nothing more than a silent backdrop to the splendor they enjoyed. But to Lorenzo, this work was sacred. Every sweeping motion of his broom, every wipe of the dust from the polished surfaces, was a small contribution to his dream of giving his children back home a better future. Tonight, as he pushed the broom across the marble floors, Lorenzo remained unnoticed by the guests passing by. They moved around him, their eyes fixated on their phones or their conversations, never acknowledging the man who worked silently to keep their surroundings pristine. And that was just fine with Lorenzo. He didn't need their recognition. His focus remained on the task at hand, as it always had been. The calm of the Meridian Hotel lobby was suddenly shattered by a sharp, demanding voice. "Hey, you stop right there!" Lorenzo paused, his broom stilling mid-sweep. He looked up to see Hannah Williams, a wealthy, sharply dressed tourist, standing just a few feet away, her eyes narrowed and accusing. She was pointing at the floor where a leather wallet had fallen. Her voice rose again, sharp and full of accusation. "What are you doing with my wallet?" Hannah demanded, her tone filled with disdain. "Thief!" The words echoed through the quiet lobby, and for a moment, everything seemed to stop. Guests froze in their tracks, the bellboy pushing a cart stilled. Lorenzo could feel every pair of eyes turning toward him, and the usually calm atmosphere of the hotel was replaced by an oppressive silence. Lorenzo swallowed hard, his heart pounding in his chest, but he kept his composure. "I didn't take your wallet, ma'am," he said, his voice calm and steady. "It fell while I was cleaning." But Hannah wasn't listening. She took a step forward, glaring at him with narrowed eyes. "I saw you," she spat. You were lurking around it, waiting for me to turn my back. People like you always think they can get away with this." Lorenzo's stomach twisted. He had heard these words before, the kind of words that painted him as a thief simply because of his uniform, his rough hands, his appearance. But he pushed those thoughts aside and kept his focus on the situation at hand. "I swear, ma'am, I didn't touch your wallet. I was just sweeping," he said again, his voice firm but respectful. But Hannah wasn't done. She looked at him as if he were a piece of dirt on the floor. "Don't lie," she snapped, her voice growing louder. "I've seen your type before. You think you can get away with it. I've been to Paris, Dubai, everywhere. People like you always try to take what isn't yours." Lorenzo felt the sting of her words. His hands gripped the broom tightly, his knuckles whitening. He took a deep breath to steady himself. "I work here. Ask anyone," he said, trying to remain calm despite the growing tension. "I'm not a thief." But Hannah only rolled her eyes, unimpressed. "Call the manager," she demanded. "Call the police. This man tried to steal from me right here in your fancy hotel." The entire lobby was watching now. Whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire. Lorenzo could feel their eyes boring into him, their judgment heavy. The silence in the room grew suffocating. Every step he had taken in his years of work to stay invisible and unnoticed now seemed to betray him in this one moment. He didn't know how this would end, but he refused to let her see the fear in his eyes. As the crowd's murmurs grew louder, he stood tall, the broom still in his hand. He was a janitor. He didn't have much, but he had his pride. He wasn't going to let her strip him of that. The tension in the Meridian Hotel lobby continued to grow as Hannah's voice rose in volume, her words echoing off the marble floors and high ceilings. "I told you," she snarled, her face flushed with anger. "Call the manager. Call the police. This man is a thief. He tried to steal my wallet right in front of me." Her finger pointed relentlessly at Lorenzo, as if accusing him of the worst crime imaginable. The words hit him like cold water, a force that left him breathless for a moment, even as he tried to steady himself. Lorenzo felt every eye in the lobby turn toward him, their gazes full of suspicion. The whispers began almost immediately, a low murmur that rose in volume, wrapping itself around him like a thick fog. Guests who had once passed him by without a second glance were now staring, their judgment heavy and palpable. The murmuring spread like wildfire. "Did you see that? He looks guilty." "I knew something wasn't right." Lorenzo's throat tightened as his mind raced. He tried to calm himself, telling himself that he couldn't let the weight of their opinions drown him. But the atmosphere had changed completely. The hotel, once a place of serene luxury, had become a courtroom where he stood alone with every eye on him. His heart raced in his chest, but he refused to let the panic show. He could not lose control. He wouldn't let her win. "Call the police," Hannah insisted again, her voice sharp and demanding. "I want him arrested. Now." The hotel manager, a middle-aged man with glasses perched low on his nose, seemed hesitant. His eyes flicked from Hannah to Lorenzo, the uncertainty in his gaze evident. He fumbled for his phone, looking lost in the chaos. Yes, ma'am," the manager stammered, clearly intimidated. "I'll call the police right away." Lorenzo's stomach twisted with dread. He had worked in this hotel for 3 years, scrubbing floors, cleaning bathrooms, and hauling trash, but never had he felt more out of place than in this moment. He wasn't just a janitor now, he was a suspect, a criminal in the eyes of everyone around him. The thought made his chest ache. His fingers tightened around the broom, his knuckles white from the pressure. "You can't do this," Lorenzo said, his voice barely above a whisper, but the words felt like a lifeline. "I didn't take your wallet, I was just cleaning. Please check the surveillance footage, you'll see I'm telling the truth." But Hannah was too far gone to listen. "No," she hissed, her eyes narrowing. "I saw you, you've been watching me. You waited for the moment when I wasn't looking." She scoffed, glancing around at the crowd. "You think I'm stupid. People like you are always looking for a way to take something." Lorenzo's breath hitched as her words sank in. He had faced these accusations before, in smaller, quieter moments back home in the Philippines, times when his honesty was questioned because of his appearance. But never had it felt so suffocating, so raw. His chest burned as he tried to focus on the facts, trying to drown out the poison in her voice. The manager, still looking shaken, stepped back, fumbling for his phone. He dialed the number for the police, his voice quivering as he explained the situation. "We've called the police, ma'am," the manager said, his voice strained. "They're on their way." It only took a few minutes for the police to arrive, but to Lorenzo, those minutes felt like hours. His mind raced, heart pounding in his chest. He could already feel the judgment in the air, the invisible weight of their assumptions crushing him further with each passing second. Finally, the door to the hotel lobby opened with a soft whoosh, and two uniformed officers stepped into the space. Their boots made heavy final sounds as they walked across the marble, and the crowd parted in their wake, creating a clear path. The taller of the two, Officer Raymond Cruz, had graying hair and a stern face that seemed carved from years of experience. His eyes immediately locked onto Lorenzo, his gaze unwavering. The second officer, Officer Leo, was younger, with sharp eyes and a nervous energy about him. "Step forward," Officer Cruz ordered, his voice low and commanding. Lorenzo's legs felt heavy, like they were made of stone, but he forced himself to move. He took a slow step forward, his heart racing faster with each movement. He could hear the whispers growing louder as the officers closed in on him. "Hands where I can see them," Officer Cruz added, his tone brokering no argument. Lorenzo's chest tightened as he raised his hands, palms open to show they were empty. The cool air of the hotel lobby seemed to grow colder, and his mind went blank for a moment. His body tensed, the fear threatening to swallow him whole, but he forced himself to stay composed. He knew what was coming. He could feel the cuffs in Officer Cruz's hand, just waiting for the right moment to close around his wrists. "I didn't steal anything," Lorenzo repeated, his voice shaking but firm. "Please check the cameras. They'll show you everything. I was just cleaning." The officers didn't respond right away. Officer Cruz's gaze remained fixed on him, unyielding. The older officer's hand hovered near his belt, and for a moment it seemed like the world had stopped spinning. "Check the footage," Lorenzo repeated, his voice rising just a bit with desperation. "You'll see I'm telling the truth. I didn't take anything." Hannah stepped forward then, her voice ringing out with renewed confidence. "He's stalling," she sneered. "Trying to buy time. It's too late. I know what I saw. He's guilty." The crowd shifted, eyes still fixed on Lorenzo, their whispers louder now. Some even began to murmur about how this was exactly the kind of thing that always happened in places like this. The whispers stung, but Lorenzo stood tall, trying to silence the noise in his head. He had to hold on, just a little longer. The seconds stretched out and the tension in the air grew unbearable. But all Lorenzo could do was wait for the truth to come to light. The tension in the lobby was suffocating. Lorenzo stood there, his hands still raised, the weight of every pair of eyes on him. The murmurs of the crowd grew louder, their whispers full of doubt and judgment. Hannah stood beside him, her arms crossed, her smug expression unwavering. The situation felt hopeless, but just as Lorenzo's heart began to sink further, his phone buzzed in his pocket. Lorenzo froze for a moment, his chest tightening. He quickly pulled out the phone, seeing the name Victor Santos flash across the screen. His older brother, the one person who could turn the tide. His hands shook as he answered. "Victor, please," Lorenzo whispered urgently, his voice trembling. "I need you here. They're about to arrest me." Victor's voice came through the phone, steady and calm as always. "Stay right where you are, Lorenzo. I'm on my way." Minutes felt like hours as Lorenzo stood, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. But finally, the door to the hotel opened, and the familiar sound of polished shoes clicking on the marble floor broke the silence. Victor Santos entered the lobby, tall, broad-shouldered, and impeccably dressed in a sharp gray suit. His presence immediately commanded attention, and the air seemed to shift. Victor's gaze locked onto Officer Cruz, and he walked directly toward him. "Let go of my brother." "Now," he said, his voice calm but authoritative. Hannah's eyes widened in disbelief. She had no idea who this man was, but the authority in his tone made her pause. She scoffed, trying to recover her composure. "A lawyer? What do you think you can do here?" she mocked. Victor didn't respond to her. Instead, he turned his attention to Officer Cruz, who seemed to hesitate for a moment. "You're making a mistake," Victor continued, his tone unwavering. "This man," he gestured toward Lorenzo, "is not the thief. I'll prove it." Victor's confidence shifted the mood in the room, and the crowd watched in anticipation. The hotel manager, still visibly shaken, scurried to grab the security footage as Victor demanded, "Get the footage. Now." Rando, the manager, nodded quickly and rushed to the back office. The silence was thick, the eyes of the crowd locked on the screen as the footage played. It showed exactly what Lorenzo had said. The wallet fell from Hannah's purse, and Lorenzo had continued sweeping, oblivious to it. The video showed no signs of theft, no sneaky movements, just a man doing his job. Hannah's face drained of color as she watched the footage, her mouth opening but no words coming out. Her grip on her purse tightened, her fingers trembling. The reality of her accusation crashed down on her, and she could no longer maintain her confident facade. Victor stepped closer, his voice cutting through the silence. "You owe him an apology, ma'am," he said, his gaze cold but composed. Hannah tried to protest, her voice shaky, but the damage was done. I didn't," she muttered, but no one was listening anymore. Officer Cruz, now realizing the gravity of the situation, turned to Lorenzo. "You're free to go, sir," he said, his voice softer than before. The cuffs were slowly removed, and the tension in the air seemed to dissipate slightly. Hannah, her pride shattered, turned on her heels and stormed out of the hotel, her steps heavy with humiliation. The crowd watched her leave, the whispers now filled with pity and disbelief. Lorenzo stood there, his hands still slightly trembling, but relief washed over him. His brother had arrived just in time. The truth had been revealed and the storm had passed. The atmosphere in the Meridian Hotel was electric with relief as the footage from the security cameras played, clearly showing that Lorenzo hadn't stolen anything. The video was irrefutable. Lorenzo had simply been doing his job when Hannah's wallet fell, and he hadn't touched it. The silence in the room was thick as the truth settled in. Hannah stood frozen, her face pale as the reality of her false accusation hit her. She had no words left, only the humiliation that now clung to her like a second skin. The police officers exchanged glances before Officer Cruz, his voice more sympathetic now, turned to Lorenzo. "Sir, there's no evidence to charge you with anything," he said, giving Lorenzo a slight nod. "You're free to go." Lorenzo exhaled slowly, the weight that had been pressing on his chest lifting with the confirmation of his innocence. He had feared this moment, the moment when the accusation could have become a permanent stain on his life. But now, with the truth on his side, he felt the storm inside him finally calm. Meanwhile, Hannah was being escorted out by the hotel staff, her head down, her heels tapping sharply against the marble floor with every step. The guests in the lobby, once unsure of Lorenzo, now watched her leave with a mixture of disbelief and judgment. No one spoke as she passed, but the silent consensus was clear: she had lost, and Lorenzo had won. As the tension in the air lifted, the hotel manager, Rando, stepped forward with a hesitant smile. "Lorenzo," he began, his voice sincere, "I'm truly sorry for what you've been through. You've been an excellent employee here, and I should have stood by you sooner." Lorenzo nodded, the exhaustion of the day settling in his bones, but he gave Rando a small, appreciative smile. "Thank you, sir," he replied quietly. The hotel manager, still visibly shaken, looked around at the guests and then back at Lorenzo. "You've shown great character today. I want to personally thank you for your patience and professionalism. You're a valued member of our team." He then turned to a nearby staff member. "Give Lorenzo the rest of the day off. He's earned it." As the lobby returned to normal, something had shifted. The whispers now spoke of Lorenzo with respect. Guests who had once walked past him without a second glance now smiled at him as they passed. A few even nodded in acknowledgement, offering quiet words of gratitude for his hard work. For the first time, Lorenzo felt like more than just the janitor. He felt seen. Lorenzo stood in the quiet lobby, watching as the last few guests filed out of the hotel. His body was sore from the long hours of cleaning, but there was a lightness in his heart that hadn't been there before. He had been falsely accused, humiliated in front of strangers, but he hadn't given up. He had kept his composure, remained calm, and stood by the truth. And in the end, the truth had set him free. The lesson was clear to him now. Perseverance and integrity had seen him through. Even when the odds seemed stacked against him, when the whispers turned into accusations, he had held onto his belief that he was not guilty. His commitment to doing the right thing, even when it was hard, had been his strength. Throughout his years of hard work, Lorenzo had learned that people often judged him based on his appearance, the worn-out uniform, the rough hands. But today had shown him something different. It was not his clothes or his job that defined him. It was his actions, his honesty, and his resolve. This experience had taught him an important lesson, one he would carry with him forever. Don't rush to judge others. It's easy to make assumptions about people based on what we see, but the truth lies deeper than appearances. We should take the time to listen, to understand, and to be patient before passing judgment. As Lorenzo walked back to his broom, ready to finish his shift, he knew one thing for sure: the truth had prevailed. And in the end, it was the truth that would carry him forward, stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever before.